I'm going to call to order the meeting of the City of Salem, the Budget Committee for November the 13th, 2024. And will the recorder please call the roll?
Member Belicheks.
Present.
Member Cohen.
Present.
Member Allen.
Here.
Member Manville.
Present.
Member Vera Brandel.
Present.
Member Stapleton.
I'm here.
Member Phillips.
Here.
Member Gwen is absent. Member Gonzalez.
Here.
Member Julie Hoy.
Here.
Member Nordyke. Here. Member Varney.
I'm here.
Member Chris Hoy is absent. Member Dixon.
Here.
Member Curtis.
Here.
Member Geyer.
Here.
Vice Chair Nishioka.
Here.
Chair Brown.
And present. And I have asked Member Cohen to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Will everyone please stand?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I do want to say, as always, very appreciative of the staff that are here and those that are watching online. Thank you so much, staff, to always working behind the scenes. We see you mostly, and sometimes we don't, because we know that you are working. So thank you, staff, for all that you do. We really appreciate you. And then, of course, to this body. Hello, everybody. It's good to see you. It's good to see you. It's going to be a fun night tonight. I guess it depends on how you define fun. But since we're in this together, I would say let's definitely make the best of it, especially as we talk about budgeting for our city and in preparation of next year. I do know just a couple things tonight. The CFO, he's going to be sharing tonight, and also from Moss Adams. Most of you know that we have some shortfalls, and tonight, if we can walk away with having anywhere from 1 to 3 of those priorities that we participated through on this online survey, that would be great. So later tonight, Moss Adams will present, and the goal would be let's walk away with top 3, and then we'll come back in January to see where that takes us. I have no desire in being here till midnight, so just so you know, that is not my desire whatsoever. So the goal is definitely have some great conversation. So having said that, we have some additions to the agenda this evening, including several pieces of testimony. And can I get a motion to approve the additions to the agenda?
I move to approve the additions to the agenda.
I have a motion by Vice Chair,
Second.
and I have a second by Member Varney. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion passes. Next, we're going to move into some public testimony, and I'll just, as always, like to highlight the reason behind what we do, and so it's always great to hear from the public, those that are here, and of course, those that are online. So thank you in advance for those of you who are going to share. Many people have already shared with us their thoughts via email, and so we have these beautiful stacks of paper just letting you know that the community does interact with this body. And so thank you. Thank you for your input. Thank you for your suggestions, comments, feedback. It's really appreciated. So for the members of the public who have signed to testify, I'm going to ask that you share with me your name, your neighborhood, and your ward. And you will have approximately 3 minutes to share with us tonight. There'll be 2 podiums. There's that one, and there's the one over there. And we're going to ask that when you come to the podium, there's a little button that you can push. It'll come on green just like this, and you'll have 3 minutes to share. And when you see that light begins to flash, that lets you know that your time is short, meaning you have roughly 60 seconds left. If you decide to have a dissertation and keep talking longer than the 60 seconds, then yours truly will come across, and I'll be like, hey, can you wind it up so we can move on to the next testimony? So that's what we'll do tonight. And we will begin with Beth Fox.
Oh, thank you very much. Hi, I am Beth Fox,
My address is 940 Cross Street Southeast, 97302. I am a Salem native, and I have basically grown up with the library, and I am speaking in support of its funding. When I was a kid, my sister and I would take part in the summer reading challenges and all of the other programs that they have for children, and that's basically what gave me my love for reading. Over the years, I've watched the library expand to become just an amazing place with services for people of all backgrounds, all ages and interests. To name just a few of the things that the library provides, they have infant and toddler story time, crochet and sleigh for teens, monthly Lego parties, free ESL classes, the Library of Things where you can borrow a pressure washer or a violin, free use of computers for the public, meeting rooms for groups, study halls for teens, and there are also ongoing concerts and events. I've gone to a mushroom ID course there, a ukulele concert, and there was a really important talk that was given by survivors of genocide. So, in many ways, the library has become a community center and a destination location like the Jack Malong building or the riverfront. And it's also it's a busy place. I was there on Saturday, and the parkade was full. I went up to the children's discovery room, and there were kids everywhere. A librarian said that they were there for the Read to a Pet program, and she estimated there were about 100 kids that showed up. So, and I remember this one kid. I noticed her because she reminded me of me when I was a little girl. Yeah, when I was about that same age. She was about 3, and she was clutching her books to her chest, and they were about as tall as she was, and she was bouncing up and down. She was so excited to be there. And all I think is that if the library closes, her parents are going to have to tell her that she can't ever come back again, and it's going to break her heart. And maybe worse than that are all of the other children, the future children, who, if they can't attend programs like that, may never discover that joy of reading, how important it is. And when reading is fun, learning is easier, and you end up having better students and more educated adults. And I think that we really need that. I think Salem needs a library. So I ask you, please, even though there is a budget shortfall, if you could find some space for funding the library, that would be very appreciated.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next, we'll have Senator Deb Patterson, followed by Jim Shepke.
Push this button. Oh. Good evening, Dr. Brown and city councilors and members of the budget committee. My name is Senator Deb Patterson. I'm a resident of Ward 7, and I'm very well represented by Councilor Nordyke. Good evening. I'm here to testify in support of continued funding for our public library. London, Paris, New York, Chicago, Tokyo, Berlin, Montreal, Rome. Can you imagine these cities without libraries? Salem is obviously smaller than any of those cities. In 2023, our population was 177,432 as Oregon's capital city. And recently I was for a meeting in Missouri in Webster Groves, where the population was 23,449, less than 1/7 of the population of Salem. I went to the library there just to check it out because I know of the challenges we face here, and their library hours were 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Thursday, 9 a.m. to 4:30 on Fridays and Saturdays, and 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. on Sunday. Having access to a public library must be a priority for the health and well-being of our communities, for the children, our seniors, and every age in between. That's who I saw when I was at the library earlier today, and every day I'm there. Libraries are not a luxury. They're an essential public service. Please continue to fund our public library. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Shepke,
Thank you.
how are you?
Thank you. Mr. Chair, members of the Budget Committee, Jim Shepke, Ward 2. Tonight, as you set priorities for the 2026 city budget, I want to remind you to please use your equity lens. I provided you with information about that at your place tonight because I wanted you to have that with you. Please be mindful tonight of the commitment that, as it says, quote, an equitable community overcomes disparities by providing increased levels of support to community members based on their needs. And I would contend that the neediest members of our community, the most underserved, are our children. 24% of our population is under 18 years old. And that, by the way, is more than the percentage of people like me over 60. And 20% of the children in our school district are growing up in poverty. 1 in 5. We should all be dismayed by the third grade reading scores just released by the Oregon Department of Education. Only 24% of the third graders in our district tested proficient. 24%. And that's down 2% from last year. It's the lowest among the 10 largest school districts in the state. Now, why is that the city's problem and not the school's problem? It is the school's problem, but it's also the city's problem. It's the city's problem because we have the worst funded major public library in the state. Thousands of our children, many in poverty, are growing up without books in their home and a library in their lives, like I bet most of you grew up with. How do we know that a public library that instills a love of books and reading in every child, beginning at birth, makes a difference? We only have to look up the road to Portland, which maintains 15 branch libraries, one within a mile or two of every family, all of which are open 7 days a week and in the evenings, all of which offer reading programs in multiple languages to children with different abilities every day, all of which are going out to preschools and daycares and reading programs, offering training to parents on the importance of reading to their children. Portland also has many children growing up in poverty. East Portland has the highest poverty rate in the state, higher than Salem. But here's the takeaway for you. Write it down. The percentage of third graders testing proficient in Portland public schools last year was 55%. 55%. More than twice the performance of our third graders. Do public libraries make a difference in children's reading ability? Yes, they do. Do all children deserve to grow up with a library in their lives? Yes, they do. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, we'll have A.J. Rudd, followed by Victoria Tim. No? Are you Victoria?
Everybody, good evening, Council. My name is Victoria Tim, and I am from Ward 6. I have to assume that you all got into local politics to better your community, maybe create a legacy for yourself. For all the constraints that we all know you're facing, you have my sympathy. State laws that hobble your ability to tax, a voter base that doesn't want to pay, inflation, and a growing hole in the budget. Fact is, it is not an easy time to be running the city. People are upset and looking to you all for answers. But despite all of this, we elected you, and you are our leaders. So you're in charge of making the best of a bad scenario. This is why I would like to warn you that history is watching. The financial decisions you make today will reverberate for decades to come. You have the power tonight to choose what kind of city Salem will be, what your legacy will be. So, if in your choices you decide to defund and or close the library, that will be your legacy. A legacy that'll make the national news. A legacy of shame with a distaste for the most vulnerable among us. And history will know you best for when you turned your back on the city. If the library closes, who knows how long it'll be before it opens again, if it ever opens again. Closing the library is not something that is easily undone. The biggest city in America without a library. Can you imagine that? Just imagine that for a second. Who would want to move to Salem? Who would want to visit? And what does that say about us, about our priorities? So if you care about your city, which I have to imagine you do, as leaders, you'll protect the library and create a legacy for yourself of defending knowledge, defending the poor, and having a love for your community. The choice is yours.
Thank you. Next, we're going to have Taylor. I'm going to mess this last name up, so my apologies in advance. Is it Rekup or Dekup?
It's rake up.
Rake up.
What you do to leaves. Hello, my name is Taylor Rakeup, and I live in 4, represented by Councillor Gwynn. I'm here to express how angry I am to hear that City Council is still considering closing down the Salem Public Library. About 7 months ago, I stood in this exact spot and spoke on that issue, and once again, I am here because the library is still not a priority. Once again, the library is on the chopping block. Our library is a keystone institution in our community. The library is an equalizer, offering free services and amenities like job fairs, story times, tax filing assistance, crafting workshops, English language classes, and free internet access. Is this committee prepared to help Salem residents reckon with the loss of these services? Is City Council? Our city government wants to close the library while at the same time offering the city manager an $18,000 pay raise. Dozens of library workers will lose their jobs, their livelihoods, if the library closes. Now is not the time to increase the salary of someone who already makes $252,000 a year. The library needs to be a priority. Not pay raises, not hollow gestures, not meaningless censures. The library. Salem is a state capital. Does this committee, does City Council want to bear the shame of closing down the library? Because I would not. If my anger doesn't motivate you, who sit on this committee, who sit on City Council, maybe this will. Any councilor who does not prioritize the library, who votes to close down our library, will lose my vote. And I don't think I'm alone.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, we're going to have Laurie. I cannot make out your last name. So Laurie, if you're here, please come on down. Take your time, please. We are in no rush. Thank you.
Dr. Brown and councilors and members of the Budget Committee, my name is Laura Doherty. I live in Ward 1. I just came here from the library. I go there, spend several hours a month. You know, in the library, I like to read magazines, look for books that, I want to read, or look on the shelves to see if there's something I hadn't known about. And while I'm there, I hope you all will spend some time there and see the people using computers, little kids checking out stacks of books this high, teens, with activities, adults taking classes, meetings going on in the various, meeting rooms. It's a very, very busy and, vibrant place. And I hope that if you haven't been there recently, that you will go, spend a few hours and just look around, see who's there and see what's going on. Recently at an event that I was at, someone, she's actually here, she had a sign that said, "Libraries are public safety." Because our public safety budget seems to all be about cops and fire department. And yet, I think public safety has to do with things that contribute to our well-being, to our mental and physical health. And libraries are definitely a big part of that. Also parks, where I spend, a fair amount of time. I'm not as familiar with Center 50 Plus, but I know many people find that to be a place where they get a lot of very interesting activities and have friends, and things like that. So these are places that should be priorities in our budget. There's money in the police and fire budget that can be moved over to fund some of these things. Our budget is the way we actually implement our values and our priorities, and you are charged with helping to define what those values and priorities are. And so I hope that you will think hard about what you want to see in our city. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Members, we're now going to move to some testimony that is online. And so is Donna Rodriguez, are you there? How about Rainbow Olmsted? Are you there?
Hi, I am Rainbow Olmsted. I live in Ward 1. I don't have a speech or anything. I just want to say that the library is very important to me. Please prioritize it. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you for your testimony. And one final more, that would be Jake Miller. Are you with us?
I sure am. Let's have a couple technical difficulties here. All right. I'm Jake Miller. I live in Ward 4. If Salem is important to you, if Oregon is important to you, it is vital to consider both the implications and the cascading effects of educational suppression, intentional or not. I will not mince words when I say this. The denial of educational resources will disproportionately affect communities that are already underserved, including low-income households. And it is a form of oppression, intentional or not, to deny people as a whole the opportunity to learn. I am reluctant to fully turn this discussion towards politics, since I don't believe that the preservation of easily accessed information should be political, but unfortunately, this too has been dragged through the muck and the mire of political feuds. So I will briefly reference a still relevant paper by Eric R. Hansen and Andrew Tyner published in 2019. In it, they state that the likelihood of voting increases with education and schooling. They continue to break it down and state that schools foster norms of voting both at the primary and secondary levels and college as well. If we look towards the new regime and their intentions with education, you may already see where I'm going with this. In an era where public education is under threat of forced information suppression and the undereducation of today and tomorrow's children is at risk, it's important that places of learning separate from those institutions remain alive and fully accessible. Following this, libraries are equal cornerstones of learning and implementing civic engagement, such as voting. This kind of engagement will lead to committees that are more involved and invested in the health of our people, our city, our state, and arguably our planet. Pulling the funding out from under the library will directly and indirectly affect election outcomes in the future, and if you intend to be alive in the coming decades, this will affect you too. In a similar vein, if you are someone that says that children's well-being is important to you, then you must understand what the deprivation of a safe public place to learn and grow will do. Libraries offer bright new horizons for children who are discovering what kind of people they are. They give safe havens from abusive households or schoolmates, and they foster curiosity and encourage fun. Most importantly, they show children that learning is not limited to something that only happens in schools. In the end, it's knowledge that will help us survive. To understand the world is to cherish it and involve oneself in the past, present, and the future. Please show that you care about the people and especially the children by supporting the library. Please do not offer apologies after walking down a perpendicular path of education suppression in the name of budget cuts. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Ms. Bush, by chance, did Donna Rodriguez ever? Nope? Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your testimony online and, of course, in person. We do appreciate your words, your concerns. As always, if there's ever a time to share your thoughts, this would be that time. So thank you for your testimonies. Next, we're going to move to the approval of our minutes from October the 30th of 2024 of this particular body. May I have a motion to approve those minutes, please?
I move to approve the minutes from October 30th, 2024.
I have a motion by Vice Chair Nishioka,
I'll second.
and I have a second by Member Stapleton. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Seeing none, that motion passes. There are no action items tonight, but our CFO, our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Eggleston, he is going to come and share with us about some information items, and then we're going to go on from there. Mr. Eggleston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a couple slides just as a little extra context for the committee. The first thing we're going to look at is the City of Salem preliminary financial summary for the first quarter. One second. I got it. Sorry about that. Small technical difficulties.
No worries.
I wanted to talk about the quarter one and how it fits into the overall financials of the city, because it's a snapshot in time, and the pieces of it are very helpful and pieces of it are not very helpful. So I want to just put it in a little context. So what you have on your screen, or up on the screen, I'm happy to share these after the meeting. I put them together right before this meeting. The columns on the right, the 6 columns on the right, are what we went over a couple weeks ago. The 5-year forecasts. The ones on the left is a little context for the fiscal year 2023 actuals, the fiscal year 2024 budget, the fiscal year 2024 actuals, and then the 2025 budget. So the budgets are in green. So the budget is what eventually gets recommended by the budget committee and then adopted by the city council in green. So just for context, what happens, so in 2023, we start with 40.68 million. We collect revenue, we pay employees, we pay bills, we use $4.1 million of fund balance, and we end with 36.58. For the 2024 budget, here in green, you can tell that there were some differences between what we were budgeting and what actually happened in 2024. So when we went into 2024, we expected a couple more $1 million of fund balance. And then the actual expenses, the revenues came in slightly higher in 2024. The expenses, I do apologize. I think I have a small typo. I shouldn't put slides together right before the meeting. I do know that the actuals are correct. So in fiscal year 2024, the net expenditures, this number down here toward the bottom, 181.53 is correct. The 170.22 is not. So the total expenses was 170.22 million in 2024, with the change in fund balance, or the use of fund balance, of $1.5 million, which ends us with this 35.08, which carries over to the year-end estimate for 2025. And you might ask why I'm trying to explain this, and what I'm trying to explain is it's a really iterative process. Once the budget gets adopted, it gets monitored, and it changes, and I'll show you just here in a minute what that really looks like. So from the 2025 budget here in green, compared to the year-end estimate, what we have is budget monitoring, and this is probably the most boring part of our financial management job. But what it means for the city is all the department directors, all the budget analysts across all the departments in the city, you can see them listed there on the right. We do this for all the funds, but I'm highlighting the general fund. And what happens is there's vacancies, things change, contracts go up, contracts go down, things get renegotiated. We, on an ongoing basis, I'm highlighting several different months here, we make estimates for where we're going to land for the year. So this is on the expense side. You can see the budget here on the left for fiscal year 2024. It's the completed year, so it's easy to highlight. I'm happy to share these slides. So the budget on the left, in August, we expected to land quite a bit lower, 167.84. In September, a little higher. October, 172.52. December, 171.28. This is likely what we use for the 5-year forecast. So when we're setting fund balance for the following year, that's what we usually use is December. And then January, March, April. And April's where we have to cut it off, because that's when we give the budget to this body. We propose the budget to the budget committee. We're done monitoring because we have to move on. But what happens is there's still activity. There's still changes. There's still more vacancies, more expenses, maybe higher overtime, maybe unexpected people leave. So more activity happens. So in this case, in April, we expected 172.3 million expenses in the general fund, but we landed at 170.27. And I know this seems extremely detailed, but this is just to highlight the diligence of not just the budget office, but all individual departments. So it's not the 5 people in the budget office that monitor the budget. It's every single department who are looking at every single individual position, how it's vacant, when they expect to fill it, if it's going to get reclassed, changes, if you're adjusting compensation. We take all that into account when building these estimates. And to go back just a little bit, and I apologize, this is very, very small. The fiscal year 25 year-end estimate. So that's what's included in the forecast, and that diligence is what I want to show you, because that's the current estimate for where we're going to land for the fiscal year 2025. It will not be where we land. There will be changes. There will be possibly more or less revenue. There will be more or less vacancies, but it's our best estimate at this time with the information we have.
Mr. CFO, just for clarity, can you go back to your previous slide? So just for the folks that are here and those that may be watching, on the left, you have the total, 181.53, right? And then far to the right, you have your actuals, 170. Somebody could say, okay, well, I see the total and I see the actuals. That looks like there's like an $11 million difference. Where is that $11 million? I can hear someone asking that question.
In fact, a couple of you asked that question, which is one of the reasons why I built these slides and coming back to you.
I need to get a crystal ball. Go on.
No, that's perfect. So what happens? You have so real quick, we budget for full employment. Every single employee that we have authorized is budgeted fully, and then we expect an organic vacancy. We expect some positions to be vacant. We might not know what department they're in, so we have an overall estimate for the whole city, for the general fund. So that's where you get those savings. So when you see that $11 million difference, that's generally vacancy savings, or it might be unspent contingency. If you remember, we budget $3 million in the general fund. If we don't spend it, it just stays in the budget, but it doesn't get expended. And where does it go? You might ask. We count on it. We need it for the following year. So we have that built into our estimates. We need that vacancy savings. We clearly want everyone to be fully staffed. It's just not a reality that it can happen. But we count on that vacancy savings to build the fund balance for the following year, to reprogram, rebuilt into the budget to fund the services the following year. Another question, I apologize for the small font. I'll be sure to send this to you. This is a look at prior years back to 2011, and then the current and forecast years. And what this shows you is the actuals in the general fund for expenses, and then the budget amount and the difference, so the actual to budget. This is not a surprise. This is planned. It's how most cities budget in Oregon. Some people do attempt to budget for less than full employment, but it can get really messy. So we're very consistent. We budget for full employment. And what you see there on the right, ranging from 91%, I think that, in 2015, up to 95, 96% of the budget is spent. And just to compare that to the fiscal year 2025 through fiscal year 2030 budget, we're forecasting full employment, but then we're taking away that organic savings. So you can see 96.3, 95, 95, 96, 96, 96.1. And what you see there is in fiscal year 25 and 26, we have a better idea of what our cost of labor is going to be. We have contracts that are closed. We're more certain of where we're going to land, especially for 2025. So you see a more aggressive savings expectation. In the out years, you see a less aggressive savings expectation because we don't know what labor is going to do. We don't know what PERS is going to do. So you see slightly less, but still not outside the realm of where we've been the last several years. And I'll stop there to see if there's any questions.
Members, I have a question on the floor. CFO, Member Allen.
Thank you, Josh. Oh, I have to move in over here. Okay, fine. So it might be a timing issue with regards to where the estimates are being made by the finance staff, but I'm looking at FY24 at 170.3, and then I'm looking at the net expenditure estimate in 2025. So that's 14 million. I'm rounding 14 million. But then going from 25, 26, it's 10, and then another 10, and then a 13, and then a 14, and then another 10. I mean, as you go out, you expect that those numbers to grow, and yet of the ones I'm looking at, the largest increase is from FY24 to FY25. Is there a reason for that?
Yes, absolutely. So in 2025, it's reflecting additional labor contract adjustments, pretty significant increases for our police union, pretty significant increases for our ASME union. And I should note the first quarter report doesn't reflect the negotiated contract for our ASME, our General Service Union. It just got ratified. We expect that retro to happen in December. So what you'll see for the second quarter is the labor will get caught up. So right now, people in the ASME union have been operating with zero cost of living adjustment. They'll get that retro payment for those wages, and you'll see that more on par with maybe the police department summary there.
Was there a follow-up, Member Allen?
That would make sense if there was a lot of one-time catch-up, retro, but otherwise, if the labor costs are greater than historical or anticipated, shouldn't that show up in future years as well?
It absolutely does. So in fiscal year 2025, when you adopted the budget, we didn't have those contracts closed and they weren't included in the budget. They are included in the net expenditure estimate. So what's happening is it still fits in the budget. We're not expecting additional budget impact, but we're having less savings than we expected for fiscal year 2025. But it does reflect some significant wage adjustments for those employees, which is why you see a big jump. And then you'll see a lower jump for 26, and you'll see a higher jump whenever we have a PERS rate increase. So kind of on that 2-year cycle with the state bienniums.
Got it. Member Curtis, and then Vice Chair Nishioka.
Thank you. I think you just answered that, Josh. But so PERS rates are every 2 years?
That is correct, yes.
And then the contract is it a 3-year contract?
So we have 6 different bargaining units, and they have different start dates. We try not to do them all at once because it's a lot of effort for the HR team and everyone to negotiate those. So generally we have 3-year contracts. Sometimes it's 2, but they're staggered. So we're always going to have a contract that's uncertain into the future.
Right. Thanks.
Thanks, Member Curtis. Vice Chair Nishioka, that answer your question? Additional questions from the members? Okay. Mr. CFO, would you like to continue with your preliminary items?
So that about completes it for the information reports. I should note, several of you have sent us questions, some today, some last week, some a while even further back that have taken additional effort. They are not forgotten. We will get you answers. It just isn't this evening. So at least by your January meeting, if not before, we'll make sure to send this body the packet of answers for all the outstanding questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we're going to move into your preliminary financial reports for the City of Salem, the fiscal year 2025 quarter 1, and also fiscal year 2025, quarter one, Urban Renewal Agency. And you're good.
I'm good, thank you.
You're good. Okay, perfect. So one of the next things that's going to happen, Moss Adams, they're going to come and share and present with us the findings from our survey. And I do want to say thank you to all the members because guess what? All 18 of us completed the survey. That's huge. That's huge, right? That's huge. It lets us know that no one slept through that email. So thank you, members, for responding to that survey. But that survey, that will be the bulk of our conversation tonight. Again, one of the things that I said moments ago before we opened was that if we can walk away tonight with 1 to 3 priorities, that would be a win-win for us. And then we will come back in January. So that would be the goal. And throughout the presentation, yes, there's a question on the floor. Member Hoy.
Thank you. I have a question before Colleen starts, just about the process of serving on the Budget Committee and how it works for us as members. I have struggled a little bit with how to engage with fellow members and whether or not that's I don't know, even appropriate, because I have questions and I kind of see things a little bit differently sometimes. And I wrote out questions and I brought copies for everyone. And I'm wondering if it would be appropriate to share those publicly so we know we're all on the same page and I'm not just speaking to individual members here and there.
Right. Well, I do think it would be helpful for us to see that information. Now, for us to comment on it, I would say that we probably need to read it prior. But I'm totally open to you sharing information with this particular body. But I am going to lean on to Mr. City Attorney to make sure I don't mess anything up. And Member Hoy, I agree. Member Hoy, I think there is value and jotting some things down to make sure we're all on the same page. So, Mr. City Attorney.
Good evening, Dan Atchison, City Attorney. Yeah, it's perfectly appropriate to share written communications between budget members. Best way to do that is to send that to staff, and staff can get it out to all the other members and include it into the packet. If you've got it tonight, we can take that and distribute it.
I do have it tonight, and I do appreciate that because it does feel a little bit like people might be asking the same questions I'm asking, and I don't know that, so I'm out there trying to do a bunch of due diligence and figure stuff out, and it could be that I'm doubling up. So I'd just like to be really clear and open about all of that. And do you want me to just take one and pass it down, or? It's 2 pages.
Question on the floor, Vice Chair Nishioka.
Yes, thank you. City Attorney, while you're at the podium, you might want to just review meeting rules so that we all have an understanding. It sometimes gets confusing for many of us.
I'm not going to go through the rules because I don't have them in my hand right now, but do you have any particular questions?
I think it was more about passing out, information that, as you just said, questions go through staff that then can be dispersed through everyone else. Being careful not to have serial meetings in that you maybe want to talk about something and then that person then talks to somebody else. More about basic
Thank you, sir.
Rule setting, I guess, for meetings.
Sure. Well, this is a public body, so you're subject to Oregon Public Meeting Law and Public Records Law. You're all aware that you're not supposed to meet in a quorum. So for this body, it's 10 members can't meet together, and that's either physically together via email or telephone or any other manner. As Councilor Nishioka referred to, there's a serial meeting, which is where some members, maybe 2 or 3 members, get together and decide on a course of action, and then those members go and speak to other members, and eventually you get to a quorum. And if basically the problem is if you have a quorum of the body, so 10 members, through through indirect communications, decide on a course of action, decide and deliberate towards something that's a committee business outside of a public meeting, that can be a public meeting violation. So you should avoid that. So when we try to communicate with the budget committee, we usually try to blind copy all the members so you don't have those accidental reply alls. So if you are sending communications out to your other committee members, send that to staff, and staff can get that information out to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And I do want to say that tonight, after Moss Adams gives their presentation by Ms. Colleen Rosales, I do want to say that the information you shared, Member Hoy, we did have a second member to share information with us also, and that was Member Manville. So thank you to you both. One of the things that we have to be mindful of is that the staff has not had the opportunity to go through the paperwork. And so we have to be careful because we could be discussing something that may or may not be the same from, it may be missing some facts, right? And so I just want to be mindful of that. And so we can talk about it, but the CFO's office and Norm Moss Adams, they haven't had the chance to validate, the findings. So there's that. I do want to say prior to Ms. Colleen coming forth is that it would be great tonight to hear from all of us because obviously your voice matters. And so I will do my best to facilitate that. One thing I will ask of this body is that we allow Ms. Colleen to go through her presentation. And so if you have questions, if you could just jot those down. And then when she's done, I will go around the room and we'll do our best to get through every single one of those questions. Does this sound fair? Online, are you good with that? Perfect. All right, Ms. Colleen, take it away.
Great. Good evening, Budget Committee. Colleen Rosales from Moss Adams, back again to talk about budget priorities, the discussion we started 2 weeks ago. So I'm just going to run through a little bit of a reminder of what we talked about the last meeting. So you see the committee's role on the left. We're establishing priorities, reviewing budget scenarios, refining the budget based on those priorities and principles, and then finally recommending a budget to council for adoption. In between meetings, staff goes away and does work based on the priorities that you'll set tonight and the principles that the leadership team has established. I think it's a good reminder as we go through this process that this is iterative, it's collaborative, but it should stick to principles, stick to priorities that you establish as a body. As we talked about last time, priorities are important for a couple of reasons. One is to simply say, hey, we're going to figure out what's most important so we can make those tough choices, but also so that we can make them consistently so we can focus on community outcomes. And there is a tendency in a process where we have to go through reductions, especially that short-term emotions are going to drive decisions when you don't think about the long-term consequences. And so having this discussion about priorities up front will hopefully help to stave that tendency off by really trying to stay focused on those outcomes. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So as a reminder, the city has an existing policy and strategic framework that's driven by priority-based budgeting. At the top, you see those result areas, which are explained in depth on this pillar to my left. And we'll go through those result areas and how they track to the city's budget and the city's current priorities today. In the middle, we've got the strategic plan. That's a 5-year strategic plan that was adopted in 2020. And then we've got the annual council policy agenda. So what are we going to do in 1 year with the limited resources that we have? These are the policies and strategies that you're working within today. This is stuff that's already in motion and something to consider as you go through this priority setting discussion tonight as well. Last meeting, we also presented a series of principles that the leadership team put together. They established these principles in part because they want to make sure that they're transparent to you and to the public around the process that will be followed. So we think about the priorities, that's the outcomes, that's what you are all focused on. These are the principles that the leadership team will take as they prepare those budget scenarios for you. And we did ask you to just weigh in on those and see how you felt. But just a reminder that the leadership team is really trying to take this with a very measured and principled approach. And recall that when we go through all of these different iterations. So I'm going to show you a couple of different priority sources so that you can see where the community is and where prior budgets have been. The first is the most recent community survey. This was a survey of likely voters that was done in September. And you can see far and away homelessness and public safety are the top two community priorities. These questions were also asked a little bit differently than certainly we asked you or how the budget is prepared, but just so you can see, this is where the community is with respect to likely voters just about a month ago. In April, as part of the Revenue Task Force, the city also did a survey taking a look at priorities in a couple of different ways. And so the most straightforward priority question was, what would you pay more for? What would you not pay more for? And you'll see this, which was a survey representative of Salem's entire population, that it was really police, fire, parks, and library are up there at the top with, I would say, right under parks or right under police and fire, we have a majority of folks saying they'd be likely to pay more, and then we get to a minority underneath. So that's where the community has been in the last year. Then we have your current budget. So this is how the current city budget breaks down by result area. This is the most direct translation of this committee's priorities as recommended to council last spring. This is where we are. So we're at safe and healthy community as number 1, safe, reliable, and efficient infrastructure as number 2, and then good governance as number 3. And this is, again, includes the enterprise funds. On this slide, we've got just the general fund, which is where that structural deficit is. And the general fund is overwhelmingly dedicated to public safety, not a surprise. Safe and healthy community takes up most of it. And then good governance is the next chunk, followed by welcoming and livable community. And I'll show you how that breaks down by department. So police, if we're going ranked order, police 1, fire 2, and then I would, if we wanted to lump in everything that's kind of in that good governance category, that would probably be next with enterprise services, finance, city manager's office, and then behind that you have community services and community planning and development. So again, these are your priorities today, right? If you never articulated, hey, what are our priorities? Here's what they look like. These are our general fund priorities today. So we asked you all to take a survey, and again, we had a 100% response rate. It will tell you I have been a public sector consultant for 21 years, and that's the first 100% response rate I've ever received on a survey.
See how special we are?
This is, huge compliment and thank you.
And Ms. Colleen, I want to interject this. So just so the members know this in the community, this is the first time any of us are seeing this. So none of us saw it ahead of time. Just so everyone knows, as you see this, the members are also, this is our first time seeing it, just so everyone knows.
Okay, so the first thing we asked was for you to rank the principles that were provided at the last meeting. And just a note on methodology, these were presented to everyone in random order. They were ranked 1 through 8. So the highest ranked got 8 points. And the percentages you're seeing is the percentage of the total points earned. And so we've got follow the law as number 1. So thank you for being law-abiding citizens. But that also means we're passing a balanced budget, right? That's ultimately what that means. What I actually want to point out is that the 3 at the bottom, so not initiating new services without sustainable revenue or making trade-offs, using runtime revenues for one-time costs or to replenish fund balance and then do it well or don't do it at all, those are at the bottom. And those are the hard choices that this committee has to make. Those are the hard choices that the leadership team has to make, because the stuff at the top is, okay, we're going to take care of people and do a good job with our taxpayer dollars, right? But those things at the bottom, we're going to have to make some pretty tough choices. And so what that says to me is that you all probably are going to have to spend some more time thinking about how you'll be willing to do that, because you didn't feel super excited to do it on this survey. So next we asked you to do a head-to-head choice exercise to, instead of just a straight ranking of the city's result areas. So this was a series of random matchups, and each area could be selected a total of 5 times. So that percentage, again, is that total count divided by the total opportunities you had to choose. And these results line up with the current budget by result area. In this survey, there was a little bit more preference for governance and livability than the budget percentages would show, but this lines up in ranking order with how the FY25 budget was developed and adopted. So we also asked you to select your priority general fund programs, and again, a head-to-head matching exercise. There were 91 matches here, so again, thank you for that 100% response rate, because that was a long survey. And the reason that we took this approach was to say, okay, if you had to make a decision, what direction are you going, to sort of prime you for some of these tough decisions you will have to make in a reduction scenario. So we have fire first, police second, outreach and livability third, library fourth, and internal services fifth. And then after parks maintenance, we've got kind of less than 50% of folks feeling like, okay, this is a priority. So this is what came out, just consensus in the survey. And I'd love to know your reactions to this data presented, any surprises or questions that you have, and I'll turn it back to the chair to facilitate that discussion.
Thank you, Ms. Colleen. The floor is open. Yes, question on the floor, Member Manville.
Yeah, I was just curious who came up with these short descriptions. Like police emergency response is a subset of the police, but is that meant to include all of the police services? Or like some of these are phrased in ways that would elicit a certain emotional response, where others are more drab in the wording.
Mr. CFO?
Well, I apologize for the drab wording, but it was I did the short descriptions. I tried to keep the framing neutral, so I apologize if it didn't come across that way. But like the fire emergency response, police emergency response, if you think of our core service, that's what we collapse to. So that's the main service of those areas.
Yes, Member Belichick.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So just to clarify, the words that we're seeing here on the printout aren't the words that we were asked in the survey, right?
I believe there were additional words in the survey that helped describe some of the services. I'm happy to share the survey wording with the body also.
Is that something that you would like to see, Member Belichick, or?
Just kind of finishing up the thoughts that were shared earlier, just so everyone's clear. I think where that question was coming from, the words on the graph aren't the exact words we were asked, but they're very similar, and I get which ones we're talking about.
Yes, Member Nordike.
Thank you. Support services. I worry that could mean something different to everybody in this room. So I don't know what definition you meant may or may be different.
Services and code enforcement. And so that was just, as I was prioritizing, I was kind of thinking how others would be looking at this and understanding it, and anyway, that thought just came up.
Thank you for
Just
sharing.
wanted to share.
Mr. CFO.
If I may, I also struggled with the nuances of the groupings, because there's definitely some employees, if you were to give an employee this survey where they're not represented, their service isn't listed. But I thought this was a reasonable level of not quite program level, not department, so kind of split the needle, because if we had already had 91 questions, we didn't want to go much bigger than that. And just for clarity, the park ranger is part of parks maintenance, just for. They are under parks at this time. I think that was a recent switch with this last year's budget.
Member Nordike.
Just one other observation for now. Code enforcement, if you were to ask my neighborhood associations where to rank it, it would be higher. Officer Romano is, I feel like they will throw flowers at her feet every time she walks through the door, because she does such an outstanding job for her South Salem beat. So, and I, when I was doing the ranking, I took that community feedback into account. But these are all anecdotal observations. But anyway, I just know that my people in South Salem love our code enforcement officer.
Thank you, Member Nordike. Any other initial reactions? Yes, Member Curtis.
Thanks. So on the community survey, page 3, I guess it's slide 6, is this where people, I don't know if all these add up to 100. I tried to do it quickly in my head, but I didn't. So, in other words, my question is, people could think that homelessness is their number one priority, but Center 50 plus might be a really high priority for them too. But if this question was just asked to name the one priority that you have, do you know what I'm saying? Or were people able to ask or rank a couple different things? Am I
Mr.
making
CFO?
sense?
We don't have John Horvick with us this evening, but I believe it was either the top 3 or 4 that they could list. So they didn't. If they listed one, they just did one, but it could be up to 3 or 4.
Oh, okay.
And so, Mr. Civil, so would it be fair to say that how it's ranked now, that homelessness was the number one concern that this body had, or the number one priority, rather?
So this was a community survey, 400 plus people in the community. So at this point in time in September, yes, the 54% mentioned homelessness.
Oh, my apologies. Just write the survey.
Josh, they got 400 to complete it. How many did they attempt? I think that's a good number to hear too.
Yeah, really interesting question, and I'm glad you asked. So when they do the community survey, not everyone responds to surveys when you receive them either by text or phone calls. So the outreach was more than 40,000 in Salem to get around the 400 responses. So pretty extreme outreach to get that statistically valid survey amount.
Okay, and I just want to highlight that again. So our survey was done, sent out through members in the community, over 40,000?
Correct, 40,000 attempts.
40,000 attempts, and we received how many again?
That was to get the statistically valid sample of around 400.
Got it, 400. Member Bailachek's.
Thank you, Chair. Since we're getting to the numbers, Josh, you said 40,000 attempts, or attempting to contact 40,000 separate individuals for the survey.
You're stretching my my memory here. I'm going to see if Courtney, do you know that they answered that question? 40,000 attempts? Yes, 40,000 attempts.
That's a lot.
And I think these were by text and phone calls?
Correct.
40,000 attempts, and we roughly got back, for this to be statistically significant, 400, and the community said their number one concern is homelessness. Would that be correct?
That is correct. Of the responses, 54% said homelessness. And I will note, just for clarity, if you look on the screen, it shows we've asked this question several times, and homelessness, it went up for several years. So 54% is actually down since 2021, where it peaked.
Got it. Yes, Member Manville.
Just to comment, my understanding, Colleen, was this was likely voters. Is that correct?
That's correct,
Yeah.
yes.
Just to comment, that's not representative of the full community. Voters tend to be richer, whiter, older
This is
homeowners,
true.
et cetera, et cetera. So it's not saying this wouldn't trade on to the people missing, but it's not a representative of the community, but of likely voters.
Likely voters. We're going to go online now to Member Phillips.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And then my question is, what's the margin of error for this, the 400 that was statistically significant or randomized? It's always 400 for this community, but was it like 3.5?
If I remember correctly, it was 4.9%.
Okay, so I just want to caution people in looking at this. I mean, definitely, homelessness since 2017 has gone up, but from 2021 to now, I would say there's not much statistically significant variability. I mean, that's within the margin of error. The difference between 58 and 54, just like 2022 to 2024 is about the same statistically, in terms of there's not a difference that you can say is outside of the margin of error.
Correct.
But there's still this is more than 50% of people spontaneously identified homelessness as the number one issue for several years in a row, and about a fifth of the population has identified public safety as the second most frequent thing in those last several years as well.
Member, Ms. Rosales, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, so this is one data point from a pretty significant survey. The full results were presented to council just last month, and they can be viewed on the city council meetings and agenda page. You can view the whole presentation as well as download the survey report and the slides. So there's lots more information where this came from.
Additional reactions? Yes, Member Curtis, and then Member Stapleton.
So I'm trying to make sense of this and how it feeds into our budget discussions. So this question about homelessness, was that framed as something that the city would do? I mean, work on? In other words, people can be very, very concerned about homelessness, but do they think that is something the city should deal with, or was this just their general concerns about the city of Salem?
Mr. CFO.
Thank you. I think we're straying outside the knowledge we have here. So if we want to bring that expertise back, I did send this link to the budget committee earlier in October before your last meeting. I'd encourage you to watch it. It was a fairly short work session, relatively, just over an hour. Really interesting information from John Horvick. But I believe this data point, it's just what's your biggest concern with in Salem at this time. But there's a lot more information in the report and in the work session.
Right. Member Stapleton.
Thank you so much. Before I ask make my point or question or whatever, I would like to speak to that. I think this has been a frustration for me on council the whole time that I've been receiving this survey, is that is pretty much the information we get. It's not, are you happy with what we're doing? Are you dissatisfied with what we're doing? Do you want us to do more? Do you want us to do less? Like, this is the only data point we get, and it really has not been helpful for me as a counselor to interpret the needs and wants of the community, other than they see it and they don't like it. But I don't know what else to take from that information. So I just wanted to share your frustration with the lack of helpfulness that this data point is.
And how it feeds into how we prioritize what the city is going to be paying for.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so my question here, I just found this really interesting and wanted to tease this out for maybe some follow-up conversation with my colleagues. When on slide 11, we talked about the importance of following the law, and being good stewards of taxpayer dollars seem to be really right up there for all of us. But what I find really interesting is that when we look at things like code compliance or code enforcement, that's us following the law, right, that we put out there. Planning services, right? Like, this is, I think about how we are implementing our Salem plan, or how we are going to address our housing crisis, which is our homelessness crisis. That all is dependent on our planning group as we move forward. Again, incentives for affordable housing. Like, I'm looking at that main kind of group of things right there, and how that really, I feel like, is in a little bit of conflict to our earlier statements of wanting to follow the law and be good stewards of our taxpayer dollars. So I find that really interesting to me as I look at how this all has kind of come out.
Ms. Rosales, can I ask you a question? And it's going to follow what Member Stapleton just said. Is there a way for you to, on that particular slide, to phrase a question that you would like us to engage upon for that particular slide?
So my next question for you all is, what priorities do you propose for next fiscal year's budget?
Love it.
You ready?
Please. Ooh, it's quiet. As a former teacher, I have excellent wait time. I can sit here all day and stare at the beautiful faces. And Member Phillips, why am I not surprised? Go right ahead, sir.
I can't stand silence. So I just want to confirm, right now the question is, what does this members of this body want prioritized, moving into the next budgetary cycle? Is that the question?
That's correct. What priorities do you propose?
Yeah. This is where the rubber meets the road. I guess my question to staff would just be to reiterate, we saw some nominal changes throughout the year in the detailed analysis of like actuals versus budgeted, but we're still looking at that shortfall of about a little less than 18 million in this next budgetary cycle. Is that still the facts that we have?
Thank you, Member Phillips. So right now we're projecting a $17.7 million deficit next year. That's the current forecast, the current methodology. We are trying to get the forecast validated. That could shift slightly if they're recommending some changes, but it's a good operating number at this time.
Thank you, Mr. CFO. Member Phillips?
Yeah, so, this is, the $1 million question or the $18 million question. How do you rank a community not having a library, as the thing that got the most testimony, both, in emails to this body and tonight, versus, making reductions to police or fire? I mean, these are impossible questions. And, it's what this body moving forward in January is going to really have to start to tackle. I'm utterly torn. I mean, I still think, part of the answer has to be finding a way to raise some new revenue, because the size of that missing funding is so substantial that, everything's going to get cut over the next several years without fixing that structurally. I prioritize probably the library, police and fire on nearly equal footage. I think that I have something ranked out in my mind, and then it's like, God, like not having a library, it does feel like it's part of public safety. So before anything gets cut, I would just beg that the community is given more opportunities to find ways to raise revenue, whether, it's through an option levy or a special taxing district or something. We've got to be open to considering new proposals. I don't think we're going to get any new revenue, or not a large amount of new revenue, without asking voters directly. So those are my top three, would be police, fire, and library at this point in time. And a close fourth would probably be the Center for Hope and Safety.
Thank you, Member Phillips. Next would be Member Stapleton.
Yeah, just to follow up, Member Phillips, did you say Center for Hope and Safety? Or were you talking about Center 50 Plus? I'm just trying to...
I get that name wrong every time. Center 50 Plus Senior Center. I think it's got Hope and Safety in there somewhere.
Okay, thank you. I have a question.
Please.
Is that okay? Really interesting question for me is, I want to understand the risk or the liability that the city is experiencing when, say, we don't, I guess maybe a simple one here would be parks maintenance. When we don't maintain our parks, what kind of risk does that open the city up to? And is there any way to quantify that in this conversation?
That's a good question.
Or maybe deferred maintenance and infrastructure investments. Maybe that's a better one. I don't know which one, but we talk about sidewalks that are not repaired, right? And then somebody trips and they fall and they sue the city.
Right.
So that ends up costing us money. That's what I'm trying to get at. And what are the risks for each of these different areas?
I really appreciate the question. We don't have that information tonight, but we could certainly bring something back. I mean, that would be a risk assessment to figure out, if you didn't do X, what the risk was. We've looked at that in the past, and Moss Adams has helped us, I think. But it's certainly something we could bring back, but we don't have it here this evening.
Okay, thank you. And I know we've had this conversation. I mean, we've been dealing with this for years and years now and trying to figure out the best path forward. And, we talked about if you have to shut down parks, then, what does that look like? Are we now buying fencing to go around neighborhood parks to not allow people in because it's not maintained, and you have a liability issue if people are still utilizing an area that isn't maintained anymore but still owned by the city? So those are some of the questions that I have in my mind as I move forward that I think, I probably won't be here for the next, I don't think we're having any more meetings the rest of this year, but it would be really interesting and I think valuable information for the Budget Committee to have moving forward.
Thank you, Member Stapleton. Member Dixon, I'll get to you in just one moment. I do think there's value in that, Member Stapleton, because for us, we have a good idea as to what we wanted to see prioritized. And obviously, tonight we'll be on record saying, hey, prioritize A, B, and C, and so forth. I think there's value in asking ourselves, if we cut the police, if we cut fire, this is what it's going to look like. If we close Center 50 Plus, this is what it's going to look like. If we see what I'm saying, so there is this causation that we have here, because whatever we decide to cut here, we're going to feel it over here. And I think for our community, they need to see that, because whatever we decide to do, it's going to impact all of us. And that's the piece where when we come back in January, it's almost like this. How many of us have ever gone to a birthday party? You go to a birthday party and people bring you a lot of presents. Have you ever had someone come to your birthday party and they brought you a present and you have to ask yourself, why did you bring me this? It's like, why would you bring that to the birthday party? That's not something I would even want, right? But you had a party nonetheless, and somebody brought you something, you're like, I don't want this gift. Where's the receipt? Even at a birthday party, it's your birthday party, you can still leave your birthday party and not be 100% happy because somebody gave you something that you did not want. When you think about the services that we are responsible for in this city, there are some things that we live here that if we cut, someone's going to feel the pain of that. And it's not just one person. Every entity that lives here, votes here, works here, business owner, you name it, whatever we decide to cut, there is going to be an impact. And none of it will be easy. If someone says, hey, let's just cut out the fire department. If we close 1 or 2 firehouses, and I've said this for several years now, and I'll keep on saying it, if you close 1 or 2 firehouses, the response time when you have to dial 911 changes. Right now, Irvin, here in this chair right now, I don't need 911. I really don't. Why? Because I'm sitting here, I'm happy, I got something to drink, I got my tea right here, I feel good in my body. So right now, as a voting citizen, I don't need 911. The moment I cut those services, do you think I will need 911? And even if I don't need it, my neighbor may need 911. So that's where the conversation gets really tight for us, because not only are we making decisions for ourselves, but we're also making decisions for our neighbors. Member Dixon, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My top, you want 3, and are these just for the general fund or for the whole budget?
The whole.
Okay. Emergency services, which would be fire and police, library, parks maintenance. So if you bundle the emergency services together, they're my top ones. If that's for the general fund, if you broaden it to the whole budget, we have to support the city's infrastructure. We have to provide essential services that no one else is going to provide, including clean water, those sorts of things. And we have to provide a governance structure that's both reliable and also fair. So those would be my top priorities. Depends on whether you're looking at the broad spectrum or just at the general fund.
Thank you for sharing. Question on the floor. Yes, Member Gonzalez.
I think the question I have, and where I'm thrown off a little, is we went through this exercise, 90 questions. And for those that don't know, it was like they'd grab emergency response versus police versus outreach versus library, and then they go to police versus Salem versus library, and then they go library versus. It was like this 100 questions, and so the answers are here. So now you want us to just shout them out now? That's what I don't understand. We sort of did this. We took the time to do this 100%, but now I don't understand what the exercise is here. Like you want us to start picking them out individually? That's what I'm just not sure what you want.
You could agree to use these as your priorities if you wanted to, but these are survey results, and everyone takes a survey differently. It's worth the committee discussing and identifying, are these our priorities? Do we want to override what the survey said? Are we going to call out one or two and leave it at that?
And that's why I wonder, why would we override what we all just spent time doing? I'd see it as a waste of time. Second of all, then I think this, to me, when we did this and I see these results, like Councilor Stapleton said, as far as the infrastructure, we have disability, we're way behind on infrastructure for people with disabilities. So I know that they would look at this and say, even though it's lower, there's a commitment we have by law, and they'd apply this information, but within the things that they actually have to accomplish. So I'm just not sure why we would go back and change this. I mean, that's what I just don't see. I'm not comfortable doing it because this was time spent. And I thought about these things, and I'm sure everybody else did. So.
Yeah, so I thank you for that, and what I hear is that you agree with these priorities in general.
Yeah, whether I like or not, this was the voice of the committee members. So, yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Why would we change it? That's the question I had.
Well said. Thank you, Member Gonzalez. Member Manville, and then Member Dixon.
Yeah. I'm struggling mentally to understand the question. In part because I think it's not, I could say my priority is fire, but that doesn't tell you whether I want an increase in fire or I want the fire to still be a large part of the general fund. Like, we have our existing priorities in our budget, and clearly police and fire are far and away our top priorities in our general fund budget. They're an order of magnitude larger than pretty much anything else in there. So I think that for me, when I'm hearing this question and when I'm took a chance to say, hey, how's this shifted over the last decade? We've cut or not kept up with parks and library. And that's a shift that isn't really in line with my long-term priorities for the community. So when I think of this question, and I think about how to prioritize in the $18 million in cuts or finding revenue, and that's my preferred, of course, the easy way out, which isn't easy, actually, given where the community's at. I think of my marginal priorities, not my overall priorities. So I'm really, like, the overall priorities, I don't disagree with. They are in our budget. They're not going to change. Great. Let's have good fire. Well, let's have underfunded fire. Let's have underfunded police. But, let's still have those be the largest by far parts of our general fund. But the marginal priorities for me are to protect the anemic library from further cuts, and to invest in parks that build community and help healthy families and grow.
Thank you, Member Manville. Additional thoughts from other members? Yes, Member Cohen?
Thank you, Chair. I wrote down a lot of different thoughts, so just follow me through, I guess. The first, I would say we need to strongly look at the recent election. If you guys saw, darn near every single bond and levy in the state of Oregon failed. If you look at the Chemeketa Community College levy that was up, it wouldn't have increased taxes, it would have just maintained it, and even that failed. We did the payroll tax and that failed. How many times are we going to go through this process of putting forward new revenues to have it fail? So I think until there's a momentum shift within our population, we have to go, at least the way that I'm going, is through the lens of there will be no new revenue, or at least no large amount of revenue. So that leaves us with cuts, unfortunately. Being that as it may, I have some questions, and I think what's hard for me is I hate hypotheticals. This is driving me insane because I hate hypotheticals. I Googled or used Google Maps to see the furthest distance from West Salem to the Central Library, furthest distance from Northeast Salem to the Central Library, furthest distance from far South Salem to the Central Library. West Salem was 4.7 miles furthest to the Central Library. South Salem was close to 8 miles, and North Salem was close to 8 miles as well. But West Salem has its own individual branch. So if I'm looking at things that I would choose to cut, that kind of starts to frame my mind as far as where we have our services now and location of it according to the rest of our city. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I really think this body, well, actually not this body because we can't do it, the counselors, that's the body that would have to do it, really needs to look again at the safety and livability bond and restructuring it. I seriously think it needs to be restructured. The reason why, within the safety and livability bond, we have options to purchase 2 pieces of land for new libraries. If we're thinking about cutting libraries, why on earth would we spend money to buy and build more libraries? Can we use that money to put it towards sidewalks and other infrastructure? Alleviate some of the pain that's on the general fund. Yes, that is forward thinking 5-6 years down the road. And yes, it requires the city council to go and tell the citizens that have already voted in favor of the safety and livability bond that yes, we're going to change it. But these are some of the questions that we have to think about if we're going to face major cuts. Can we proactively look at restructuring the bond that we have and put it towards some of the things on our general fund to alleviate some of the pain? Another thing that I want us to consider is I would like for us to look at, and I'm not totally in favor of this, I'm a public policy person, and so it pains me to say privatization, but I would be interested in hearing what the cost is of privatization of parks maintenance or code enforcement. If the majority of our budget comes from people, and if those people have increases in salary and PERS every couple of years, contract costs might be less. Is that something the city has considered or would consider? Once again, I'm most of the time not in favor of privatization because it has its own ethical issues with it. But that's something that I think the people need to consider. When we cut irrigation, some of the things that I want to think about is for parks, what is the potential damage to vegetation over the hot summer months? If we look at the vegetation in our forests, what are they doing? They're getting drier and drier, which makes it easier for wildfire. So if we were to cut wholesale irrigation to our parks, what could be the potential risk to that in a dollar amount? If we just plant a bunch of new trees, shrubs, and have them die when it hits 100 degrees because it will again in the summer, how much does that negatively affect us? The last thing I'm going to say, and then I'll give you my preferences on here, is I think it'd be helpful for us to review some of the increases to prices that we had from the last time we met. For instance, there were price increases for lots of Parks and Recs activities this summer, and just anecdotally, because I have 3 kids and I participate in Parks and Recs as well, I noticed the price increase. I still did it because I love the Stride 5, 10Ks, even though they kill me, and my kids love soccer. But I did notice that there is a precipitous drop-off of participation. So my worry is that if we increase prices for Center 50, youth recreation, adult recreation, would that then have a negative consequence to us in bringing in more revenue? So I'd like maybe a parks representative to get back that information to us of what they saw over the summer. And the last thing, and then, sorry, I wrote a lot.
You did.
I did. I think a major confusion that citizens in general have is who owns what. When people say homelessness, sure, it's in our city. Is it the city's responsibility? I'm not sure you can really say that. Does the city have a public health department? No. Who does? The county. The county and the state are the ones who have the public health departments that are here to address these major issues. So when we look at the budget, and when I'm looking at the budget, I have to look at it in the scope of what is our jurisdiction and where should we maybe shrink what we've done in the past to bring it back to what we should really, really focus on and pressure our partners in the county and state, Senator that was here, to fully fund us and help us out, because those are the issues that they have to deal with, and they have the money to deal with it. That being said, my number 1, 2, and 3 priority would be fire, police, and infrastructure.
Thank you for sharing. And there were a lot of questions in there. I'm not going to go through and tease all those out, but I know staff is here, so we'll just have to get back to those in January. Additional thoughts? Yes, Member Nordike.
Thank you so much. I want to piggyback on what Member Gonzalez said. I really loved the fact that we finally had a much more egalitarian way of soliciting input from everybody without the pressure of being in this room, under these lights, with those cameras. So I really want to honor and validate the hard work that we've already put into this. And I mean, sure, we could pick it apart, and do I have some things I would do to rearrange it a little bit? Yes, I think everyone does. But I do think it is worth pointing out that clearly people value, for example, the library more than they do adult recreation. Clearly, this group agrees that we value park maintenance more than business retention. I think that it's okay to not have it perfect at this moment, but are we as a body willing to agree that by and large, these are some priorities for us to look at? And if you're not willing to commit to your numbers 1, 2, and 3 today, are you willing to commit to your bottom numbers today? That if you have to prioritize cuts, is it reflected on this chart? So just to help move the conversation forward, because we could spin our wheels on this single slide all night. But I, for one, see this as a productive starting point. And again, we've invested the time in doing this survey. And I will add that there are 5 people who will be on budget committee next year who are not here tonight, right? We have new counselors. We don't have we will soon no longer have we don't have a Ward 5 public member. We do at the moment, but not for long. So just remember, there are some other voices that are not being represented tonight too. So I would just encourage us, can we find some common ground? What are some things that, yes, we agree? Do we agree about what our top priorities are? Do we agree on what our bottom priorities are? But I want to hear Colleen give the rest of her presentation before we commit. So those are my thoughts.
Well, you're very lucky to know that this is the end of my
presentation. She says the end of it.
I do also just want to note, so we know that we'll have 2 incoming counselors who will be on this committee in January. We did send the survey to them. Their results cannot be incorporated because they're not on the committee yet, but we have that data ready to go.
Yes, Member Curtis.
So I'd just like to say, when I took the survey, I felt like I was choosing between impossible things sometimes. Of course we have to have police and fire in a city. I mean, it's a no-brainer. But it's 60% of our general fund. So that's a big chunk. But if I chose police and fire over Center 50 Plus, which is my new favorite thing now, it doesn't mean that I don't want to fund Center 50 Plus or parks or libraries or other things. It was frustrating to me that there was no room for nuance. I might have, police and fire, again, a no-brainer, but I might have other priorities, but they don't come out that way. The way it was structured is the way I felt. So that's one point. Another is, I went to the Center 50 Plus, I guess this September, and I registered for a class on genealogy, and it was packed, hopping, and it was probably 9 or 10 in the morning, something like that. I was shocked. It's a big place. And there was people playing pool, doing exercise, taking classes. I was amazed. And then I went back to take the class, a month later, and same thing, just busy. And I don't think any of us on council or this committee probably goes to Center 50 Plus. I could, age-wise, but I don't until I went there. So I think my point is, yes, we would probably all rank that low because we don't use it and we don't know. But it is, it contributes to the quality of life for our senior citizens in this community. And I don't think we can have a decent city that's just police and firemen. We have to have community services to make this a livable place. And if 60% of our budget is police and fire, they got to cut. Maybe we do have to close the West Salem Library. I mean, we can find ways to tighten our belts, and some of these things that are priorities. I don't really know what the hours of the Center 50 Plus are, but maybe they can be reduced. It's going to save a few $1,000s. But it would be a resource for our senior citizens who use that would be devastating to a lot of people. So I guess that's my 2 cents. That's my little soapbox for,
Thank you
for right now.
Curtis. Additional members on the floor? Yes, Member Stapleton, and then Member Villar-Brandel, and then Member Varney.
Thank you. Sorry for speaking so much. Stacy, I know you haven't gotten a chance yet, but I wanted to dig into that 50 plus a little bit. Josh, could you, because I know that the funding for the Center 50 plus is actually very nuanced and that the general fund only pays for a portion of it, if I'm remembering correctly. So if the general fund dollars were pulled from the Center 50 plus, would it survive on its own? What would that look like? I'm going to pass it off to Scott. Okay. Sorry, Mr. Archer.
Thanks for letting me stretch my legs. Thank you for that question. I'll try to give a brief answer, and this would be worth some further conversation for sure. And it's interesting, I was just conversing today with Marilyn, who runs the center for us, and we were talking about these very types of potential scenarios. And so we do a substantial amount of fundraising through private donations. We have Friends Foundation. We have grants that we receive. We get federal and state dollars. So the general fund support is important for our operation there at the Center 50, but it is, we do raise a substantial amount of funds. I think we bring in something like $650,000 of outside money, and it's not a huge budget anyway. We get a lot of bang for our buck at the Center 50. So, we haven't even gone to this place yet, but if general fund support was reduced or even eliminated, could we operate the center? And would the community step up further than it already does? And, are there other opportunities? Those are great questions and some things that we need to think about. And I don't think I'm ready to answer that question tonight, but I would just say that we have some possibilities to do some additional there. But the general fund support provides a lot of what we do in addition to the outside funds. I hope that at least kind of gets to your question.
Yeah, it does. And I want it to be really clear. I am not for cutting any of this, please understand that. And there's a reason why I fought so hard for revenue to support these, in my opinion, very much so needed services throughout the city. But I did wanted to highlight the point that the funding for that is kind of complex and very different than anything else that we fund right now. It's a very unique part of our budget and something I would love to support. But thank you so much for trying to answer that. And I know you'll have to answer it further next year as well. So
and not to forget also, we do, there's been some talk about fees that we charge through recreation. I also want to acknowledge, we do charge some fees at the center for participation. Not everything costs money, but a number of things do. And also at the at the support and direction of the Budget Committee and the Council in the last budget cycle, we did review fees at Center 50 and in our recreation program, and we did make some upward adjustments. And the other piece I wanted to add is we are currently also with some of this conversation last budget cycle, we did engage, Josh and his team have been a big part of this, in basically a full review of our community services fees and charges, including Center 50, including Parks and Rec, including even our library with some of the fees that we don't charge a lot of fees there. And that report will be in hand before we begin preparing our next budget. And so that will inform what does the market bear, because you made an excellent point earlier about how many people stop participating, and that also is impactful at our Center 50 is what is the market that people, we can price people out pretty quickly. The last point I want to make, and sorry, but you've just reminded me, and I think it would be helpful for you all to have this information, that we also, for the first time, began charging non-city resident rates at Center 50 this year, as of July 1. We have implemented a program where you can kind of buy an annual out-of-city pass that gets you sort of the city rates on anything you sign up for, or you can kind of do that on an individual basis. So we've begun to put our toe in the water and move in that direction, but I suspect we're going to need to really even go further with that in this coming budget cycle. Thanks for the questions.
Thank you. Member Villar-Brandel, Member Varney, and then Vice Chair Nishioka.
Thank you. I want to echo some of what Member Manville was saying in regards to priorities. I think when I'm looking at this list, I have no doubt that fire and police will continue to be funded no matter what we do. And they have continued to be funded no matter what. They have continued to see increases in their budget over the years. I know that based on what we've heard from the leaders of those departments, they're still not funded at the levels that they need to be fully staffed and operating on all cylinders. And so I think I'd like to take the opportunity just to advocate for the other things that we haven't been able to fund consistently and we haven't prioritized historically. Things like our library and our Center 50 Plus community centers, really vital and critical community centers in our city. I think our support services too, our support service staff, they are people that do things behind the scenes to keep the city running that we don't always recognize. I think about, for example, the fire chief, I believe, was mentioning some new technology that they were going to implement or have implemented to help with locating where calls are coming from to see who's closest so they can send those engines. And I just wonder if we don't fully fund our IT department, our support team that is looking over those advances that help us to be more efficient and use our funds more responsibly, we're going to continue to see these snowballing effects that are really detrimental in the long run. And I think that we have to find that balance, strike that balance of what do we need critically in this moment and acutely. Also, what do we need to ensure that we maintain and save for the future? So again, I think support service teams, I think that our library, our parks, our Center 50 Plus, those are things that give us as a community hope and help keep us going and maintain us for the future. I recall during COVID, like early COVID times when people were at home and we're not doing things, we're not able to do things, we're not able to access a lot of things. Speaking from my own experience and where my neighborhood where I live, we saw a significant increase in violence in our neighborhood. We saw a significant increase in some really horrible incidents occurring. My husband and I personally witnessed these things. And I just think that if we start to take away some of that stuff now knowingly, and consciously, we're going to see things like that happen again. I think we're going to see people not have resources, not have the supports that they're used to and that they need to give them, again, that hope to maintain a sense of well-being and to maintain their health. And yeah, so those are my priorities.
Thank you for sharing. Member Varney, and then Vice Chair Nishioka.
Thank you. I agree with you. I was thinking along the same paths there. First of all, the support, the services that we don't see that support so many of these things. I don't know if that's what was meant by support services, but that's a huge leg of the stool. And I would need to have a better understanding of exactly what structure and understructure that provides before I made huge cuts to it, for example. I do prioritize, obviously, public safety and parks and our library. I realize, and 50 plus, of course, but I also realize that we may need to reduce a few services or change them in order to retain them. I mean, that's just, a fact of life. Center 50 plus, I worry about the senior quality of life. I mean, Meals on Wheels and their WOW van and the outreach, the things that they do that we don't, some of us don't know about or don't think about. I mean, that's really, really crucial to the livability of our city. Let's see, the whole priority thing, it was difficult. I agree with you. There was that emotion versus the logic and trying to prioritize it. That was really challenging. Another thing about services, we know we need housing, but how do we build and develop without planning? I mean, that's another support. We have a priority. We need to build housing. Lastly, one of the things I would like, I guess, before January or in January is a review of when we closed the fire stations previously, more details on what that effect was. I mean, what if we had to close one fire station to free up some money to help support some of these other things? I don't know how much that would be. I'm also very interested in what's going to happen the 1st of July when we have our new EMS system and we transition over. I mean, that's kind of a big, there may be some changes there too, so we may be able to get some savings out of fire, but I don't know. So priorities, public safety, parks, library, and Center 50 plus for me.
Thank you, Member Varney. Vice Chair Nishoko, and then we're going to move to Member Dixon.
Thank you, Chair Brown. This is back to Mr. Archer in the sense of the Center 50 Plus, and you mentioned that you use grants. When you're doing your research, you don't need to get up. Basically, I just wanted to, what I wanted to just say is if you're looking at funding and the possibility comes up that the city reduces some of its funds, I'd want us to ensure that we had any matching grant funds so that you could continue on with that, because that could affect yours, your overall funding. So I just wanted to make that statement. So I'm certainly following suit with most everybody. I want it all. I mean, who doesn't? Who doesn't want it all? But the trick is, how do we get it all, and then have a deeper understanding of all of the alls, what we might have to reduce, so that we can try to keep it all. And I think that's, to me, the biggest question. If trying to maintain all that we can, or maybe restructure bits of it. Where it is, then we can see, oh, we could cut a little here, or we could cut a little there, so that we could try to do that. But 18 million, that's not a little. And so, again, this whole process is like, trying to figure it out is hard. Libraries, parks is really incredibly important to me. I feel that is our community. We need to make sure that we have really well-maintained parks. To me, that's very important. Library is very important, but of course, public safety is too. So we have to have that. And how we get there, I want that crystal ball, just like you do.
I'll work on it.
Thank you.
Member Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could we put the slide about which programs should be prioritized in the upcoming budget cycle? Could we put that back up, the Budget Committee survey result? And Josh, if I could ask this question, if you look at that list for the upcoming budget cycle and the $18 million shortfall, starting at the bottom and cutting, how far up would you have to go on that list to eliminate the $18 million shortfall?
That's a good question. It's going to be hard to answer, Mr. CFO.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. So if I'm ignoring like mandated services, I think you'd make it partway, probably just in the support services, somewhere in there.
Okay, so you'd have to go, you could draw the line through the middle of support services, and everything below that would be gone.
To some extent, yes. I can get back with something more detailed, but I get the rhetorical nature of the question.
Well, I think everything right now is speculative, so I would appreciate it if you have time to do it. Otherwise, you've given me a general idea, and that's very helpful.
And one thing I would say, Member Dixon, and to the rest of us, is that when we come back on January the 15th, and Member Gonzalez and Nordyke have both said the same thing, when we come back, there will be other people that'll be in the space. And so there are missing voices. So there's that. And I would say that when we do come back in January, we'll definitely have the option to see if we cut this is what it's going to look like. And so we'll have that, and we'll be able to live in that tension because that's exactly what it's going to look like, especially if we start talking about firehouses. And I did hear that tonight, that if we come back in January, it would be helpful for us to know if we were to close this firehouse, this is how much it would save, right? And very similar to some of the questions Member Hoy has given us, those are some questions that I think also the staff's going to come back and have us to be answered before we come back in January. So those questions I think are going to be helpful too. Yes, Member Hoy.
Thank you. It was back in March 26th, I think, that I messaged CFO Eggleston and said, hey, would it be possible to maybe move some money from culture and tourism to the library? And his initial response was no. Those funds are, predestined. They know where they go. He said, I'll check with the city attorney to be sure. April 2nd, I hadn't heard back from Josh yet, and I know he's a busy guy. And I reached out, and he said, as it turns out, yes, this might be a possibility. And it was about 2 weeks later that the mayor brought it forward to council. Knowing that that was a one-time fix for the library, we had to do something else, and a year's going to go by really, really fast. So I knocked on the door of the idea of a special library district for some time, and just could not seem to get any real traction about that. I'm wondering, and I know these are hard times, but is it possible to do a levy just for the library? And would it be reasonable to ask the public to consider that? And the passion behind the library is palpable, and we may be able to get the interest in the community to actually pass a levy. Is it possible to do that for just the library?
I'm going to say anything is possible, but I'm going to yield the floor to Mr. City Manager.
The short answer is yes, of course.
And I would say, Member Hoy, that right behind that, and we've talked about this before, that come January, I mean, you yourself, I mean, you'll be the mayor when we come back, and so there will be the opportunity for you to share and present all those ideas, because I think you'll definitely find some traction.
May I?
Yes, ma'am, you may.
I just kind of want to know before January what the possibility might be, and how does that happen? Do we have to go to council and say, could we pursue this? Have staff trying to? I don't have the script.
Right, I'm with you.
Can we figure this out and find out what the possibility is? And
that definitely, if the budget committee were to make a motion this evening to ask staff, or if you were simply to say at our next city council meeting on November 25th, let's have a conversation about a levy, we can add that to the agenda and have that conversation.
Before I go to the vice chair, Member Gear.
Thank you, Chair. Just before we kind of move on from that, I wanted to go back to our survey results really quick so I had a chance to speak. First, thank you for standing at the podium for so long. I really appreciate it. This is a question just for comparison reasons. Has Moss Adam done any other surveys with other cities, especially like that we could compare to, especially state capitals?
No, we haven't. Nothing like this. We could go back and look at comparable cities and look at their general fund budgets, and that would get you a sense of what their priorities were.
I would be interested to
That'd
see.
probably be-
Yeah.
Okay.
I would be interested to see that. Thank you. And then also, this one's for Josh. And then Mayor-elect Hoyt kind of brought it up, the Culture and Tourism Fund. We did use that this last year, and I'm interested to see how that's performing and kind of where that's at now after the changes that we made.
Good question. Member Phillips, and then Member Stapleton, and then back to Member Hoy.
Thank you,
Vice Chair.
Chair, and thank you, Member Hoy. I would emphatically support this, even though I'm not going to be on this body in a couple months. I think it's critical that if we're looking at making any, substantial reductions, like closing something like the library, that the community needs an opportunity to vote on it. So I appreciate you asking the question and trying to take the next step in moving the ball forward. I don't know what the community is going to do, but I think it would be, malpractice to close the library before the community has another chance to vote. I think voting doesn't just serve the purpose of potentially solving a problem, but it also is a major form of communication. So I appreciate the question, Member Hoyt. Thank you.
I would second that. I believe it was Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair Brown. I move that staff return to council by the next meeting for a levy for the library, parks, and Center 50 Plus for the May ballot.
Second.
We have a motion, and we also have a second. Vice Chair, to your motion.
I think, as we've already seen, we have great community support for the library, and I feel that with the council, we can move forward. I know that there's a lot of concerns about the pulse of the community, but I think we need to know what a levy amount would need to be to support these, what we'd be looking at, so that we can determine if this is something we should at least try to move forward with, in hopes that we can save park maintenance and our library.
Well said. Additional thoughts, input about that motion? Member Stapleton, and then Member Manville,
Thank you.
and then Member Gonzalez.
I know that this is an idea that has been floating around for a while, especially coming out of the Revenue Task Force, and then within conversations with my colleagues on council, trying to figure out how to chart a path forward. I do recognize that we have seen many failures in local communities around the area for such levies, especially a week ago. I also had struggled for a while seeing if that investment of that ballot measure in a time of budgetary deficits would be prudent with our taxpayer dollars. But it was stated to me from a very wise man that we should at least try. And I think that Member Phillips also said this very eloquently, that to cut something without letting the public vote on this one more time would really, I think, be a dereliction of our duty as a budget committee and as a council. So I would be fully supportive of moving something to the ballot. And I know I would personally do what I could to try and get that across the finish line. It will take the community's support to get something across the finish line. And I think that the library and the parks and the Center 50 Plus have great support within the community. And that is where those volunteers and where the dollars that would need to be raised to get something across the finish line would need to come from. And so I think that that would be a likely place to find community support in order to get something there. So thank you for putting it forward, and I am excited to vote yes.
Thank you, Member Stapleton. Member Manville?
It's not entirely clear to me from the motion what we're framing this as. If it's a levy to increase funding for the library and police and Center 50 Plus, great. But it's coming across as something different, and it's coming across as a gamble of those institutions on the whim of a small minority of voters. And I'm not willing to gamble core community institutions on that. We have clear information. We invested city resources on clear information with DHM, and they told us voters aren't going to support this. We have clear experience of wealthy interests buying elections, including anti-tax interests, who are going to fund a campaign against this, I'm convinced. So if we want to put a levy on, I totally support that if it's for the general fund across the board, if it's for all our services. But if it's to gamble specific parts of our budget against that, that's a risk that's just too scary for me. And it's not something I would support. So I appreciate the desire to find the funding. But again, it depends on how it's framed. And so if you can clarify that it's not what I'm fearing it is, I can reconsider that.
Member Dixon, we'll get to you in just a moment, but Vice Chair, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you for that. And really what I'm asking for is staff to bring us back information on what that would look like, and trying to understand, again, the amount needed to support those programs. But to your point that the overall general fund is certainly needed. If one can have community support behind a specific thing, I think people want to vote for something like, yes, I want parks. Yes, I want this. I think it becomes challenging for a voter to say, I'm giving you money for the general fund, because they don't feel as if it's being securely sent to what their interests are. So I appreciate what you're saying, but I think at the same time, it is important for people to say, I want parks, I want money for the library. But right now, this motion is to get information. It's not going any further. It's more about understanding what that would look like.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Member Dixon, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The motion concerns me for two reasons. One, my recollection is that the DHM survey indicated that there was pretty broad community opposition to any revenue measure. And I may be misreading that, but that's my recollection. Also, we know that the staff is probably already overworked because we've cut budgets but haven't cut the number of things they're having to do. So I oppose the motion just to get the information from staff. I don't think the support is there in the community, and I don't think the staff has the spare time to put into something that's probably going to lose.
Thank you, Member Dixon. We're going to move to Member Gonzalez and then to Member Allen.
In addition to the DHM survey, Kaiser, Shemeketa lost the bond. And I was also surprised the city of Woodburn, they've been wanting a community center shot down too. So that one was really surprising. So how much, I think, do we have a round number what it costs to get something on the ballot, right? Do we have a round number?
200,000.
Yeah. That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
I'd really worry risking that going into, and now, the May elections, those are, there's less voters. I mean, it could take less effort to get the yes, so it's possible. It's less effort than the November election, so it's possible, but I would just be really careful for that reason. Just be really careful.
Thanks, Member Gonzalez. Member Allen.
Well, I'm surprising myself a little bit that I'm in support of the motion. But to Member Manville's point, I would hope that I don't believe that it's being structured as a gun to the head where you vote for it or else. Clearly, these programs are at risk. when you're talking about an $18 million hole. And so the benefit to the community is that those programs are no longer at the whim of the general fund, and they have dedicated funding. And so that's the win for the community, but it should not be such that those programs are going away if you vote no. It's just that if you vote no, those programs are then going to be prioritized along with everything else within the general fund. Giving the community one more opportunity before significant cuts have to happen seems prudent.
Thanks, Member Allen. Member Phillips, yes, the floor is yours. And then Member Hoy.
Yeah, so I don't know what the new information is going to come, but I think I would just encourage the other members on this body to be okay with hearing more. Because I don't know if the what goes to voters or doesn't go to the voters is just the library and parks, or library and the Center for 50 Plus, or some coalition that's most likely to get across the finish line. I think that, it's important not to be fatalistic and assume that everything's going to lose. I think that like a May election is different than a November election. And if we, focus the voters on what gets prioritized and, maybe increases library hours a little bit to get back to like normal, closer to normal level of services, that's a good thing that helps out every part of the general fund. So my understanding of this vote is it just gives us more information. And in that survey, the thing that got the most movement was, the idea of an option levy at a slightly smaller number. So, maybe $1.99 per assessed value instead of $1.50, got us into the mid 40s. So I know it's an uphill climb, but we got to do something that starts to make up for the missing 18 million. And I think broadly speaking, 99 cents gets us, 13 or 14 million. And if we use that to guarantee the library and maybe some parks and Center for 50, that could be really helpful. And I know I'm not going to be on this body, but I would just implore the other members to be okay with getting that information, because, there are going to be huge cuts, without that, and there's going to be even more work for staff to do.
Thank you, Member Phillips. And there is a motion on the floor, so we'll vote on that momentarily, but the motion is simply just for more information, just so everyone knows it's more information. Member Hoy.
Thank you. I want to, Josh, this question's probably for you. The culture and tourism money, that was a one-time opportunity, correct?
There is a balance left of that one-time funding, but it is one-time resources. So we'd recommend it for a one-time usage, but it could, it could be used as bridge funding perhaps. I know there's also deferred needs for those cultural tourism facilities, but I think there's approximately $1.4 million there. So it's nowhere close to 18 million, but it could help for one time for 1 year.
It's not a fix.
Correct.
Right, thank you.
Are there additional thoughts, questions, or concerns before we, yes, Member Cohen.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to maybe redirect back to Member Hoy. I think you started the conversation with the library only. It moved to library, parks, and Center 50 Plus. Is there a way for us to have both library, parks, and Center 50 Plus as option 1, library as option 2? And then with this, I also wanted to ask, because I think maybe I'm putting words in your mouth. Did you say library special district? Or
A special library district, I think is what it's called.
And so thank you. My question with that is, from my understanding, and I did some brief Googling, I'm sure we can get the professionals to do the work. Would the library special district be encompassing of just Salem, or would it be Salem, Kaiser, Turner, some of the smaller communities around Salem as well?
I can answer that, but I will not. Mr. CFO?
Just real quick, just for clarity, a operating levy and a special district are very different. And a special district is a longer term item. It's not something you'd want to move very quickly, just given the work involved, because there is a question about boundaries and how that works. We don't have jurisdiction outside the city of Salem. And if you create a new district it's a separate entity, a separate governing body, so that it's outside the city's control at that point. So whether or not other jurisdictions, other areas were annexed as part of that, that would be a question for that special district. It wouldn't necessarily be within our control.
Right. Thank you for sharing. Member Phillips, I see your hand, and then Member Nordike.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I guess I wanted to clarify. I thought I heard from Member Hoy earlier when she asked about, I think, just the library in terms of like ways to raise revenue as like a temporary look at getting an option levy as a bridge to get us towards something like a special district. And I just wanted that clarified. But I still remain in support of the original motion because I'm in support of getting more information.
In just a moment, I'll have the recorder to restate the motion. Member Hoy, would you like to offer any clarification to Member Phillips' question?
Simply that the library was top of mind for me because I feel the passion behind it and have wanted to find a fix since last March, and just would rather have something that's dedicated, so nobody has to worry about that.
Thank you, Member Hoy.
But I don't know what it takes to make it about more than one thing. I'm not the.
Right, and that's the part that the staff will come back and have some answers for us. Member Nordike, please, the floor is yours.
Sure, several items. I have deliberately been waiting to listen to a lot of input before I make my comments. But I really want to acknowledge some of the written comments we've received on the library. This is the double-sided stack of additional testimony we've received, and it is, I believe, perhaps 100% about our beloved library. So thank you, all of you. Additional, I might add. I also want to thank Councillor Hoy for raising this conversation. Although you didn't construe it as a motion, one could construe yours as a motion and Councillor Nisioka's as a friendly amendment. But it really doesn't matter if we focus on moving in the same direction. Who makes the motion is less important than who votes for it, right? So let's go back to my favorite pieces of testimony. I love it when library people come and talk because they're my tribe. You know, I am quite a library person myself. There's so many to choose from. That's the problem, right? Like, which one of yours am I going to talk about? I have to say, I like Lois Stark. The library serves as an official warming center in times of extreme cold. The library is a safe place for children, teens, and adults who are unhoused. The library is an essential, the word essential is in all caps, part of our city. Don't worry, I'm not going to read them all. I only have 2 pink tabs. Ruth Hudgens. She has like bullet points. Again, library people. Love you guys. Bullet point number 10. Libraries can ensure that non-English speakers see themselves as represented in their communities with appropriate collections, programs, and services. I think a great example of that, how many of you have seen the Dia de los Muertos exhibit? Thank you, staff and volunteers, for making that happen. Item number 13 on her list. Libraries serve as the people's university, where anyone can use free library collections and information resources to become well educated on any topic imaginable. I'm speaking out of turn. Item number 11. How did I miss this one? Libraries provide needed information, resources, and support for LGBTQIA patrons, especially young people in need of support. Well, I could go on, but we don't have all night. I think that you have to consider what could potentially fly with the voters. I think a library levy could fly with the voters. I am willing to explore information to include library, parks, and center, 50 plus. Sorry, Trevor, that was for you. Love you, dude. But I mean, sometimes you got to go with the frozen from concentrate OJ. You've got to go with the intensely passionate thing that people love and are willing to knock doors for, right? So I'm willing to explore further, and I'm all too aware of the levies that have failed up and down the I-5 corridor. I am painfully aware of that. It is heartbreaking here Woodburn didn't get its community center, just as one example. The city manager and I talked about it, how all but one recent levy failed from Forest Grove, Fall Citiesville. I'm just kidding. I'm sure they're different places. Gresham passed one. Gresham passed a levy. And they did it with a lot of public support, and we as a council have already heard about what distinguished it from that. I'm also mindful of the fact that when you saw how the library ranked within this body, how many of you ranked it a little bit higher because of all the input and testimony you've gotten? I mean, I'd like to think that it had an impact. That tells me that people can be persuaded so long as you don't talk down to them. It's possible, and I would like to explore it. And I am painfully aware also of what Member Manville is saying about, gambling. That is absolutely terrifying to me, but I'm willing to explore further information. I want to encourage this body to really think very strategically, because if we do go on the ballot, we're putting a lot at stake, right? And it wouldn't be advisable to do one right after the other. And it may not be a good idea to go in May, because what voter turnouts look at like in May elections as compared with November elections. On the other hand, if you wait until November, you won't get money from that November election until a full year later. And that's a long time to wait for our library. I urge us to not take proportionality of cuts off the table this early on. I think we need to look into that. I think Member Manville had a great little chart here demonstrating how budgets have fared over time. And they have not fared proportionately. And we've heard a lot of impassioned testimony about the impact that's had on people too. That's all I have for now.
Thanks, Member Nordike. Yes, Member Baylor-Jacks and Member Manville.
Thank you, Chair. I struggle with understanding how this fits into the role of the Budget Committee. It's sort of been my approach that we're not here as the Revenue Task Force. We're not here as the City of Salem Council. Those groups have had multiple opportunities to ask for information from the staff. Apparently that hasn't been done. I don't know if that information is out there. Let's please not ask them to redo the work. But I think this kind of conversation tends to be a distraction from what I thought we were going to do tonight, which is set our priorities. I'm a card-carrying member of the 50 Plus Center.
I didn't know you could go there.
I think they serve many people.
They
and
do.
So yeah, it's in my neighborhood. I welcome people to explore, and a card-carrying member of the library. And I think library is going to be my priority in this budget determination session, no matter what staff comes back with. And I think we have to deal with the cards that we're given. It's easy to say this is just more information, sure, but I think it's a distraction from what we're supposed to be doing if those other bodies exist, the council and the Revenue Task Force, to try to figure that stuff out. So,
Thank you, Member Miglachek. Appreciate that. Additional thoughts or comments before we move forward? Member Varney and then Vice Chair. Member Manville.
Thank you, Chair. Out of respect for my counselor, I will support this motion to get more information. I do think it's somewhat wishful thinking, but I like to be proven overly cynical and have people prove me wrong. I do want to be super clear to the council that the message should not be, if the voters vote this down, to cut the library further. So please don't misunderstand the stakes of putting a levy, but I appreciate the efforts to find more revenue and look further into the question.
Right, and the chair will refrain from input until after we've actually voted. I think it was Member Varney.
Thank you. I mean, I'm always in favor of getting more information. I know that we have some. I guess, yeah, for the last 20 minutes, 25 minutes, I've been reviewing the survey pages and scribbling down notes and looking at it and thinking about it. I guess what I would like to see in terms of information, well, in the survey, it looked at, retaining services, expanding services. It had the $1.50 per 1,000. It had the 75 cents per 1,000. I mean, I'd really like to see a whole bunch of different scenarios with both expansion, not expansion, keeping the parks. Maybe we only support neighborhood parks or community parks. I mean, there's so many different ways that we could look at this to help us make a decision. And I think getting the information sooner rather than later is best so that we are informed when we're talking to folks out in the community. I mean, have a little bit of information. So that's why I'm supportive of getting it soon or as soon as possible. Yeah, when I think about the modeling we did on the Water Wastewater Task Force with different rate increases for 25 and for 26 and different levels of the emergency assistance funds. And I thought that was really, really helpful for us to get to that point as a group to decide what we were going to do on the task force or what we were going to recommend. And so seeing something similar to that would be really helpful.
And Member Varney, to that, I did check in with Mr. City Manager, and most of the work has already been done, and so it'll just be resurfaced to all of us. So we'll see it all over again. Vice Chair?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for all of the committee's comments. I would like to help understand that the council is going to be the one that needs to bring this forward. The decision has to be made by early February to be able to be on the May ballot. So this will not end up being something that this committee would recommend to us. It would be something that council would need to move forward with if that's the choice that we make. We still want to know how everyone feels, but we will have to still continue at looking at cuts, looking at preparation, balancing the budget, because we won't know. If we do end up agreeing to send it to the May ballot, we won't know until mid-June, or that's late May. And so we'll be finished with our meeting. So we'll still have to do all of the hard work with the hope that something may happen, but we need to be ready for it not happening. So I would appreciate if Manager Staley or Josh would also fill in to make sure I am providing the information that is needed.
I yield the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councilor Nishioka. That was a perfect summation. That was what I was going to say as we closed. The reality is that I will be presenting a budget to the Budget Committee and City Council in April, in advance of any outcome of a May vote. So I am going to have to take the feedback that I heard this evening and the survey and the community poll and compile all that information and present a budget proposal to you. So stay tuned on that. But it will be a proposal based on the realities as we understand them and the priorities as they've been discussed this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Staley. Madam Recorder, could you please restate the motion that's on the floor, please?
And I'd like to look at Councilor Nishioka as I read it and confirm that this sounds good. I move that staff bring back information to the City Council at their next regular meeting regarding a levy for the library, parks, maintenance, and Center 50 Plus. Okay, that's the motion on the floor. Oh, for the May 25 ballot.
Got it. Members, everyone hear that? Okay. Yes.
Did you, the next budget committee meeting or the next council meeting?
Council, city council.
Any other room for clarity before we vote? Okay, the motion's been read. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed, say nay.
Nay.
We have one opposed. The motion passes. I refrained from speaking earlier in regards to our intent for tonight. And Member Belichick, you are exactly spot on. Our task tonight was to come away with 1 to 3 of those top priorities. And Member Gonzalez hit the nail on the head because we've actually done that. It's in the survey. We've done the work, and I commend this body for doing the work. Spending time on the survey. We've actually done it, and obviously people can see. The slide that was up there. You can see what's in an order. I think the challenge for us, and you said this, is that major cuts are going to have to happen, and we're going to feel it. And that's the obvious. The obvious is when we come back in January, we will have to make a decision on what we're going to cut, whether that's support services or whether that's responders. Whatever we decide to do, I said this last year and I'll say it again, whatever we decide to cut, it's not just a line item number. It is a family. It's somebody's job. And so we have to remove ourselves from thinking, oh, it's just money, it's just dollars, the general fund's too big, let's just shrink it. Well, behind all of those cuts, if we cut some support services, that's someone's job. If we decide to say, well, we have too many police officers on the street, that's someone's job. So whatever we decide to do, it's always good just to humanize the conversation because behind our numbers are families, people we're going to impact. And at the same time, I think Mr. Shepke said this in his testimony, is that when we do decide to make these decisions, we will have to look through an equity lens. And that conversation, I know for some, may not be comfortable. But equity does matter to us, whether it's gender, whether it's race, socioeconomic status, those individuals that have learning or physical disabilities. Equity matters, and we will have to find a way to center our conversation and to center those cuts around equity. And I'm confident that this group can do it, especially as Member Nordyke said earlier, we will have some different faces here and some new voices. It doesn't change the task, right? It does not change the task. It just allows us the opportunity to have other voices that are going to be in this space. So I do want to say thank you to the members for engaging in this conversation. Ms. Rosoulis, thank you. Did you want any final comments before I move on? You good? So the next time we're going to meet will be Wednesday, January the 15th, 2025, to hear the results of the fiscal year 2026 through fiscal year 2030. It'll be our 5-year financial forecast. It's hard to believe that, but that's what it is. Members, thank you for being here tonight, and I will consider this meeting adjourned.